On today's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, Arthur Dunn of the H-Town Rundown podcast stops by the show to talk about who does he like for Houston now and who does he like for Houston down the road.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, welcome to today's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast. I'm your Texans football analyst and credential media member, John Hickman, and thank you for making the Locked On Texans a part of your first listen of the day, each and every day, Monday through Friday, and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Hickman talking Houston Texans, that's a combo that goes together like a Saturday evening in country time. On today's show, we'll dive into Big Luke Lachey. He can play. I can't wait to talk to you guys about that interesting prospect for Houston down the road. And Arthur Dunn of the H-Town Rundown podcast stops by the show to give his overall thoughts on the draft as we wrap up our draft coverage and talk. Without further ado, before we dive into it, I want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Now, without further ado, Arthur Dunn, AD, talk to us. And as promised, we got Arthur Dunn, AD of the H-Town Rundown podcast. They do a very good job of covering the Houston Texans from an all-22 standpoint, looking at the things that matters inside the trenches, the lines, inside the hashes, everything that has to do with the film room. AD, welcome to today's podcast. Let's dive right into it, brother.
Let's go.
So when we look at this draft, right, and I'm very excited to talk to you about this because this is one of the things I consider your superpower, right? But when you look at the Houston Texans draft, we'll get into the grades. 2025, who's the player you like the most, and how do you believe that player can create a day one impact for Houston from a field perspective?
All right. So day one impact, I think the player that's going to create the most impact, one of my favorite of the draft is Jaylen Noël, wide receiver, Iowa State, speed guy, something that the Texans have lacked in the wide receiver room for years now. And he's a guy that can separate, can make contested catches. He's proven, as one of the top guys. I think he was a top 50 talent-wise guy, and we got him at 79, but he's definitely one of those guys that can change the game.
Yeah. And when you look at changing the game, how can he change the game? And Houston will be without a fan favorite here in Tank Dell, right? This wide receiver room doesn't have, like you mentioned, don't have speed, right? They got a new OC. And so in what ways, can Houston kind of look to utilize him? Like he wasn't Higgins, who was their first pick, but how can they get him on the field and use him to create scary matchup problems?
Definitely have him in the slot, man, and take advantage of in that slot area. I think he's going to be a matchup nightmare because I think he can play on the outside as well. I know a lot of people want to strictly put him in the slot, but he definitely can play on the outside as well and be that outside deep threat. But honestly, man, he's a guy that can really, really affect the game inside those numbers, inside the hashes, man. I think he can make some plays. If you look at what he did at Iowa State, he made a lot of plays inside the hashes, inside the numbers, working those linebackers, working those safeties, and I think over the top he can make something happen.
He's a guy that when you talk about his inside ability, like that's well documented. When you look at what he could do on the outside, that's where I think for Houston, do you want him to go deep? Like, is he a player that you really want to go see deep consistently when he does line up outside? Or does he have more value in terms of selling deep but coming back on some comeback routes?
He definitely has the ability to do it all. Deep, I think, would be his primary job description. But I think that, it's still, we're still trying to figure out what Nick Caley is going to come out with, what type of offensive scheme he's going to run. I know that he referenced what they did in New England and what they did in LA. And I think it's going to be a combination of all that. But I do think that he can do it all. I think he can do those comeback routes. I think he can, those in-breaking routes he's pretty good at as well. Like, he's not just a certified deep threat, but he can definitely be a decoy, and he can definitely, I think the defense will have to game plan for him.
Right.
And that's a positive for the Texans because outside of Nico Collins, we had Diggs and Tank Dell, but the injuries kind of took all that away. I don't think we had them all three together, but maybe like 2 or 3 games the whole season is what it felt like anyway. So you definitely, want to take advantage of that. And I think he's a player that's going to affect the game plan of defenses going forward, because you just can't say, oh, we got to put somebody over the top of him. But, then he takes advantage of it over the middle and up the seam as well.
Yeah, Houston finds themselves in a very good position. They traded for Christian Kirk this offseason. He's the vet.
Mm-hmm.
Noël does remind me a little bit of what Christian Kirk can bring when he is healthy. Doesn't have that 4.3 speed, but the interchangeability that he brings. Now, that's a player within our first 3 picks here in Houston. Like, that's a guy you expect to have a role day one, unless an injury happens, right? Let's knock on wood. For our later guys, look at Reed, look at Marks. There's a name that you mentioned right before we hit record for the show. You like Keonte Hamilton, Rutgers D tackle. That was a position that I thought Houston could very well benefit from drafting a young guy to build with. Don't think that there's an expectational role for him this year, but Houston is a developmental team right now with D'Amico Ryans. You can stash him, he can get better. What is it that you like about him?
Absolutely. The key thing, and I've said it multiple times. I said it on my instant review when we drafted him, and I said it on my podcast this past week about Keonte Hamilton. The most intriguing thing about him is that he's a former wrestler. He was a scholarship wrestler, and that should tell you a lot right there. When those wrestlers, he got some core strength. He's not easily moved, and he's a guy that can really create pressure up the middle, as far as in the run game and the passing game as well. He's a sleeper pick. I think a lot of teams weren't paying attention on him because of, where he went to school, Rutgers. They wouldn't, considered a great defensive team, but he definitely is a guy that they can sit up and develop. I think that he would, honestly, if you want to look at the D-line room, defensive tackle room right now, he can easily take the Kurt Hinish spot on his roster. And
Wait a minute. You are saying 6'4", 280, Keonte Hamilton out of Rutgers.
6'4", 303. Hold on, get it right. 6'4", 304.
304 can possibly take Keonte Hamilton. The Keonte Hamilton can possibly take Kurt Hinish spot this year.
Absolutely. I
think 36 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Again, Big Ten player, went up against a lot of good offensive lines in the Big Ten. You got him with a shot to create some competition, which is a thing for Houston on the inside unit.
Absolutely. I think he can play special teams as well, which is something that the Texans value. So he's a guy that, I think can definitely take Kurt Hinish spot. And when I say that, I'm not saying we're talking about bottom of the roster.
Right.
We're not talking about a guy that's going to see a hell of a lot of playing time, a guy that's going to take over anybody else's spot. I mean, we look at the rotation now. You got Sheldon Rankins, you got, my boy Tim Settle, and then you got Mario Edwards back, and then, who's to say if we bring back Fadakowski? And so you got a rotation of guys that are ahead of him, but he definitely can come in case of an injury that you can see him getting some playing time sparingly. In case of emergency, break glass type of player. But yeah, man, I think he's very talented. I think he just was overlooked a lot. And I think he can definitely, be a future part of this defensive line rotation. Not this year specifically, but definitely going towards in the future. And then, D'Amico loves his developmental defensive lineman, especially at the D tackle spot. He's made it work. He's turned a lot of people lemons into some Chick-fil-A lemonade. So he's made it.
The kids at school or lemon drops.
There you go, lemon drops. So he definitely can make something happen with Keonte Hamilton.
Yeah, and I like that conversation. He was a guy that, again, I thought Houston could have benefited from drafting a D tackle earlier, right? And I caught some flack for saying the pick where they went Jalen Smith, the cornerback out of USC. I thought that would have been a prime pick for defensive tackle. So on one hand, it shows the confidence that Houston has in the corner room and D tackle room, how it's currently put together. On the other hand, getting a guy like him late, again, no expectations, special teamer at most. If he gets an opportunity this year, he can be stashed on a special on a practice squad, but you like the developmental coaches and culture that they have here in Houston. And when we come back, it's time to look at an overall Texans grade from a film room perspective. Let's have a little fun and really dive into why your grade is your grade and how all of that can aid into what they can do on the field. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your pair controller, subscribe, or sign into your Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. You can jump into your favorite Xbox titles without needing your console in every room. And listen, how do you game and play when you're not in front of your main setup? Like hotel stays, family visits, right? You may be at grandma's house and she may be watching One Life to Live. That's all she plays, right? Well, granted, when she goes to sleep, you can go ahead and play your Xbox games. Fire TV Stick 4K makes it possible to keep playing from almost anywhere. If you already have a console, a Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take and your kids' games wherever you plug it in. So this is not just for you. Kids are involved as well, right? And you can make that sale. Like, hey, honey, this is for the family. The Fire TV Stick 4K devices are for the family. So that's a win-win for everybody. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV locked on to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. H-Town Rundown. AD is in the house. We are talking Texans. We are talking the draft, post-draft conversation. Now, Jaden Higgins, Ariante Asiri, Jaylen Noël, Jalen Smith, a lot of Jalen's, Jalen Reed, Woody Marks, Keonte Hamilton, Luke Lachey, Graham Mertz. Houston had, I think, a very good, decent draft. Their first three picks are exactly what they needed. They got some back-end help to help them with right now and also more so for the future, especially when I look at a guy like Marks and Reed. Those are two guys I'm really excited about to see in a couple of years. What's your overall grade for the Texans draft?
I give this a good A-, man. A good
A-.
Yeah. I give it a high grade. I give it a high grade because of the value that you achieved in this draft. Especially trading back out of the first round. You get a Jaden Higgins, who a lot of people had on the board as a first round pick, a sneaky first round pick, and then you get him at 34, and then you see the ripple effect of all of, I think it was 3 teams traded out right behind us when we picked at 34, which lets you know he was, the best player available on a lot of people's boards. And so you get a good value pick in him. You get a good value pick in Ariante Ursary, who some people, again, was considered a late round, first round pick. And some people say he can be, a future, if after this draft is over, in a couple years pass by, some would say he can be probably either 1 or 2 of the top tackles coming out of this draft. So you get value, you get great value in that at 48. Then you backdoor with Jaylen Noël at 79. Like I said earlier, some people had him as a top 50 prospect, and you get him at 79. That's a steal. Then you backdoor and you get Jalen Smith. I think that would be that. That's the minus.
Talk about that for a moment. So at that pick, when it happened, player who is he a good player? Do you trust D'Amico to coach him up? Do you really trust Dino Vasso to coach him up? Absolutely. But where they picked him, did you have a problem with that, or do you got to trust the process in D'Amico right now?
Me personally, I thought it was a little high, but I was expecting the Texans to take secondary earlier than a lot of people thought. I know a lot of people thought they would take secondary in 6th, 7th round, just as throwing guys, but you have to look at the roster. Out at corner, you got Lassiter and you got Stingley.
Signed Darby in the
Yeah,
offseason.
you signed Ronald Darby, but after that, Ronald Darby is almost like a Jeff Okuda in a sense. So it's like you're looking at your time, like, okay, who else is in the cornerback room? So you definitely needed to take a cornerback, and just like Kamari Lassiter has that dog and that dog mentality, that's what Jaylen Smith is. Jaylen Smith is a crash out as well. And so at the corner position, like, you gotta look at what they're looking at for their secondary, and that's exactly what D'Amico Ryans is looking for in his secondary is a crash out. So he has another crash out in Jaylen Smith. They value him, and I think I'm gonna trust D'Amico to and Vasso to make it work.
Yeah, I don't want to use the word crash out, right? But I get what you're saying. Kamari, like a dog, go out there and plays with his head on fire, and he does that celebration whenever he goes out there and make the plays. Now I want to go back to Ariante, right? Second pick for the Houston Texans. All off season, what's that word we've been hearing? Competition for the offensive line room. They have at tackle Trent Brown signed him on a 1-year deal worth up to $3 million. Cam Robinson, Titus Howard, but I think we can go ahead and leave him on the inside at left guard, which is probably the best decision. He's the vet. He's the best player in that room right now. Blake Fisher. And now you add the rookie Ariante to the mix. But Houston's thought has been they're going to put the best 5 out there. Would you be shocked, or do you anticipate seeing the rookie start or have a role for this team this year?
So I'm different, and I say, and I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna keep saying it. In a perfect world, the Houston Texans do not see Ariante. Let me say this: in a perfect world, Ariante Ursary doesn't see the field for the Houston Texans in 2025-26. That's the perfect world, perfect scenario, meaning that you give him a year to develop, because at the end of the day, he's your tackle of the future. He's not your guard of the future. He's your tackle of the future, and you definitely need to let him sit back and develop. And I think that was the plan with Blake Fisher. When you took Blake Fisher last year in a similar range that you took Ariante Ursary. And I think the plan was to not let Blake Fisher see the field. Unfortunately, Larry Tunsil got injured. Titus Howard had to move inside because of play. So because of lack of play on the interior. So you had to see Blake Fisher play last year, but I don't think going in that was the plan. I think right now, if you keep Blake Fisher on the outside, you keep Cam Robinson on the left side, I think there's a path that you have enough interior players that you don't have to force Ursary into the lineup just to say he's getting on the field. And I don't, and I say it again, I think a lot of people get rosy-eyed when they see Mekhi Becton do what he did with Philadelphia.
I'm one of those guys.
And so
I'm one of those guys.
He's an anomaly. He's not the standard.
He's also a vet who's been in the league for a while and didn't have the success that maybe New York, when they drafted him, was looking forward to. So by the time he got to Philly, and they have like the offensive line redemption program over there, which is why we're happy for King Green.
Yes,
they figured it out with him. But he got a shot to play tackle. You definitely want to see Ariante get a shot to play tackle, play left tackle, which is what he was good at. But what about his game do you look at and say, man, you know what? This is why they need to leave him at tackle. This is why he needs to be protecting C.J. Stroud post his rookie year for 5 to 10 years down the road.
He doesn't have a lot of bend as far as, bend in the corner, as far as catching the ends on the corner. He doesn't have a lot of bend. His feet still need a little bit of work with on his feet, but he definitely has a strong base. He's very, very powerful. He's going to be very good in the run game, which is why I think he's your right tackle of the future. And I think Blake is your left tackle of the future. And so I think that he's going to be more. I think typically your right tackle is your run game tackle. He's, that's your power side. You're going to run to the right, and he's definitely good, really good in the run game. Mahler at tackle, which makes me think he's the right tackle. But, I think his positives, again, is that he's base centered. He's you would say a power gap run tackle, and he can definitely do that. But again, his negatives is that he can't really move on the outside as far as catching those bend in the corner edges, and so he struggles with that a little bit.
Had a good performance against Abdul Carter. It may be overrated by some people, but
a lot of people are overvaluing Abdul Carter, and I'm just saying it now.
I'm not mad at that.
They are overvaluing Abdul Carter.
I'm not mad at that. So you got the Texans draft grade at an A-.
Mm-hmm.
I had them at a B-, and I think in 2 years that may change because of the back end of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at a guy like Jalen Reed, who C.J. Gardner-Johnson has 2 seasons left with Houston. He's on the contract for 2 more seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Smith, watching him develop, but also Woody Marks. That's a name that I wanted to ask you about before we move on.
Jaquavius.
Let's call him by his mama name, right? We know that Joe Mixon gonna hold it down this year. My theory and thought is Houston is gonna dial it back a little bit for Joe Mixon this year as much as they can, especially through the first 10 weeks. They are prepared to get this roster developed and ready to make a deep playoff run. And when you look at the amount of hits that Joe Mixon has taken throughout his year, but specifically last year when he was taking hits in the backfield, I think Houston maybe want to dial that back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you go out there and you get a running back that can catch very good out of the backfield, right? Over 1,500 receiving yards in his career. Very good running back in open space. How does Woody Mark leave his impact on the team this year? And for Houston, Marks and Damian, is that a competition, or do you look for him to be slated to be RB3?
So honestly, I think Marks is a guy where you saw a lot of Dare Ogunbowale on the field in those third down situations. You're going to see Woody Marks in there now. I think that he's a great pass catching back. He can run, inside the tackles wonderfully. And I think that is something that's a lost art for people looking for that second back. I think you want a guy that can run inside, run out, catch the ball, do all of those things, and Woody Marks can do that. As far as competition with Dameon Pierce, we didn't see much of Dameon Pierce last year, and I expect the same this year. Dameon Pierce, look.
But we did see Dameon get some opportunities. I mean, he made the most of his opportunities, and he can be a very effective special teamer for Houston.
That is his role, a special teamer for Houston. Barring injury, he may see the field sparingly on offense. I'm not relying on Dameon Pierce. They drafted Woody Marks for a reason, and I think that Woody Marks is going to be the guy that's going to come in and solidify as RB2. He has a lot of talent, man. He has a lot. I know he's on the older side, but he has a lot of talent, and it was brought up. Shout out the group chat. It was brought up on the spaces in the group chat that he shout out Bear. He reminds you of a bigger. I'm losing my train of thought. The running back we had last year, Devin Singletary. He reminds me, 2 seasons ago. He reminds you of a bigger Devin Singletary. And if he can give you Devin Singletary play, watch the hell out. Okay. I'm all for it. I think he has all the traits to do exactly what Devin Singletary did.
Yeah. And again, I think for Houston, they found themselves in a very good situation because this roster is very top heavy. Drafting some of those guys, especially in the later rounds, gives them the opportunity to extend their window of high level play because you have guys learning under all pro bowlers here on this roster. AD, man, where can they find all of your work, your podcast, and all of the great things that you do covering the Houston Texans?
Absolutely. You can find me at the H-Town Rundown on Twitter, H-Town Rundown Podcast on YouTube, and the H-Town Rundown Podcast on Instagram, Facebook. You can also follow us on our website at the htownrundown.org. So yeah, all of the socials, man.
.org, y'all, what y'all doing? Charity work too? Y'all saving boys?
Y'all
saving boys? That wasn't the assignment. Y'all need to go follow them to learn what the assignment is. They saving y'all, man.
Look, we trying to save people like Preacher Boy was trying to save, people.
Come on, man. All right. Still ain't seen the movie, man.
Hey.
Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it, brother.
Man. Appreciate you.
Thank you for making the Locked On Texans your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stops. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. But before we wrap up our draft coverage, I got to talk to you guys about Big Luke Lachey out of Iowa. And I don't know if you guys know about the history of Iowa tight ends, but Houston possibly got one. I mean, they may have a nice tight end that in a couple of years we may be looking at Luke thinking to ourselves, is he a Pro Bowler? Maybe not, but is he a contributor to an offense? Blocking, moving the ball. He could be that. In 5 seasons, right under 900 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. He played at Iowa, where they are a heavy run team, right? Because I understand those numbers are not eye-popping, but at Iowa in the last 3 seasons from 2024 to 2022, you look at 496 rushing attempts, 474, 416, compared to 163 passing attempts, 170, 192. And so during that stretch, the highest reception total for anybody on that team, 35, 31, and then 2022, 58 from Sam Laporta, who a lot of Texas fans wanted here in Houston. Now, also during that stretch, Luke Lachey's reception yards were second on the team in 2024, 231, 8th in 2023, but he also got hurt that year with 131. But his highest total, which was also third on the team, was right under 400 yards in 2022. Iowa has also been tight end U, right? Look at the guys that has come out of Iowa in the last few seasons: Sam Laporta, George Kittle, T.J. Hockenson, Noah Fant, and former Texan tight end C.J. Fedorowicz. He was a guy that was supposed to have been the extension of Owen Daniels, and Houston hadn't necessarily got back to that yet. Not from a player that they've drafted. Intent. He understands how to drift in and out of zones to give his QB time to find them. This is something you want to see from a tight end to excel in the play action game. His IQ isn't in question at all. And again, very QB friendly, good acceleration when the ball is in his hands, and he has strong hands. Lachey is a player who gives Houston the option to stash on the practice squad or use this year. Texas currently have five tight ends on their current roster. We know they'll have strong competition during camp. Irv Smith, Cade Stover, Brevin Jordan, who's coming back, and Houston gave a 1-year extension to, and the player that a lot of Texas fans want ran out of Houston, but I do think we'll see a different version of him this year from a coaching staff that will utilize his strengths a little bit more, and that is Dalton Schultz. The rookies report on May 9th. OTA start on May 28th. And I'm curious if Caley looked at Lachey, his 6'6", 253 frame, having been around Tyler Higbee in L.A., Gronk in New England, and feels like he can work with this guy without the pressure of him having to start day one. Houston they are huge on development right now. And that is something that you've seen that blueprint started when Nick Caserio got here, but you've really seen the Houston Texans blossom under developing players once D'Amico Ryans got here. Now, a lot on the defensive side of the ball, but you can also point to the fact that maybe on the offensive side of the ball, they didn't have a guy that could develop some of these guys, right? And so now the thought process is, when you look at a guy who was drafted in the 7th round, like Luke Lachey, again, Nick Caley coming over from both L.A. and New England, and his background, and not only his background, but his background with tight ends, this could very well be, I'm not going to call it a star to make it, because we can't always label players stars, But this could very well be a guy that we look up in 5 years. He's just making key plays for the Houston Texans. And he will be coming to a team here in the Houston Texans where they give their tight ends the bulk of snaps shared. Before the injury, you look at Brevin Jordan, he was featured in over 40% of the snaps played. Stover had games of over 40% of snaps played. Even late addition, Irv Smith with games with over 30% of the snaps shared for their tight end room. Although it is a different offense, Lachey will have the opportunities to beat out other tight ends for a chance to make this roster. So the possibility and potential of him, I think the competition will be great. I don't want to necessarily get into who's his competition. The Texans were very high on Cade Stover last year. Very high on him. And the biggest changes were no more Bobby Slowick, Nick Caley, but everything else is intact for Houston. And I have a hard time looking at Cade Stover's job being in jeopardy. I also wonder how many tight ends will the Houston Texans carry this year. But again, the best part about Luke Lachey is a 7th-round pick, no high expectations. He's not the savior of the room. Houston really loves putting guys on their practice squad to develop. This is a part of their MO. This is a part of their DNA. They will develop a guy. And when the time calls, they have their guys ready to be called up on Sundays. We've seen it with the wide receiver room this past year with Jerry Wayne. We've seen it with the running back room. We've seen it with the offensive line room. We've seen it on the defensive side of the ball. They will stash away guys to get them prepared, to get them ready to play. And when their time is called, their number is called, they're ready to call them up. And so Lachey is a guy that I think the learning curve and everybody already being a part of this room, being a part of the NFL, that kind of plays a factor into whether or not he'll make it or not. Again, 4 tight ends ahead of him all have NFL experience. Right? If I could have a too early prediction, the competition between Irv Smith and Luke Lachey, I think that's where Houston could possibly look at, okay, he's a guy, we really like him, right? Could have been a part of their draft board, was surprised and shocked that he was there late in the 7th. Irv Smith, a vet. Okay, how much do we need to lean on him? Or if Brevin Jordan is back to 100%, then I do think you look at Dalton, Brevin, Cade, and maybe Lachey rounding out. And also at 6'6", 253, big frame. Hey, Frank Ross, we got a special team for you. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and also wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. And follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Until next time, ladies and gents, and Texan fans across the nation, peace.